What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So today, I want to take a look at the New Orleans Pelicans, who are, have missed the playoffs for a couple of years in a row now, but Zion Williamson is really good, so it almost just doesn't even matter. Kind of taking a look at the future of this team, who's going to be a free agent this offseason, what moves they could potentially make, and just what's going on the inside of the New Orleans Pelicans. So, yeah, let's get into it. Just a reminder to everybody, these videos all this week are pre-recorded. I talked about this in the past couple of videos, but this one I'm recording on June 10th, and this being uploaded, like a week after that. So hopefully this is all still relevant to you. I'm trying to make this, as relevant as possible, but as we know, things change quickly in the NBA. So if any of this is not, correct as of the time this is uploaded, just know that all of this is as accurate as it can possibly be at the time of recording. So that's the little disclaimer there, and yeah, let's go in on the Pelicans. All right, so the Pelicans this year again missed out on the play-in tournament. They were right there at the end of the season, but just barely missed out on one of those final play-in spots and didn't get a chance to get into the postseason, just kind of like last year in the bubble, where they kind of faded down the stretch, didn't quite execute when it mattered the most. And they had a couple of injuries to deal with late in the year. Obviously, Zion going out for the last little stretch run didn't help. Josh Hart kind of missed a lot of time with that thumb injury, I believe is what he had. A couple other guys in their depth kind of missed some time there. Lonzo Ball as well. Brandon Ingram was in and out of the lineup, so not great. But, it's fine, right? They're still a very young team. They got a lot of young guys on this roster. Obviously, Zion Williamson has been amazing so far, especially, the second half of this year. He was really, really good. He's come a long way, even since he's come into the league. And I think Zion is going to be, one of the best players in the NBA for many, many years to come, as I'm sure many people will agree with me on that, because he's been clearly really, really good so far. So this team is concerned with building around Zion right now, and pretty much everybody else is up in the air. Even Brandon Ingram, I think, is on the table potentially. They just barely excited to an extension, but I don't necessarily think that he is locked down his spot with this team in the long term. I think Zion Williamson is really the only piece on this roster that the Pelicans view as an absolute must keep. So let's go over and hop over to that cap sheet and take a look at the team. So a couple free agents here, a few big ones. James Johnson is going to be a free agent here. He is not one of the big free agents. He is most definitely not going to come back. I can actually see him, signing on with a contender on a minimum deal. I think he can contribute to a good team, be a sort of enforcer guy off the bench. I still think he can play. It's just at $16 million a year, not very many people wanted him. So he kind of got thrown into that JJ Redick deal as a cap figure to sort of make that work there. So the Pelicans don't care about him. He definitely doesn't fit the timeline, and I would not imagine he wants to come back. So I can see him, signing as a minimum on a contender out there and trying to chase a ring. I think he could contribute. So no way he's coming back to the Pelicans, at least in my opinion. Lonzo Ball is going to be a restricted free agent. That's a big one for them, obviously. They could have traded him at the deadline this year, and they decided not to. He stayed on the team. He was in those rumors going up until the final buzzer there at the trade deadline, and he stayed with the Pelicans here. So, they didn't come to terms on an extension with him last summer when he was eligible for one, and so we'll see what they end up doing with Lonzo. I have no idea how much he's going to get in restricted free agency this summer. I mean, it only takes one team to overpay him, right? And there's, I think, a couple of teams out there with cap space that would want to take a look at Lonzo Ball. I mean, you can think about the New York Knicks, who need a point guard. The Chicago Bulls might not have quite enough cap space to get him, but I think they would make an offer because we know they're interested. So we'll see if the Bulls can get in on that. A couple other teams, I think, but, Lonzo is certainly coveted around the league. He'll get his payday, maybe around $20 million a season. We'll see. But I think the Pelicans want to bring him back. I'm not sure at what price. Maybe there's a sign-in trade they can work out and potentially get some value back for him. But they might end up regretting not dealing him at the deadline because if they lose him for nothing in restricted free agency, or maybe if they have to overpay him to retain him, it's not a great look because Lonzo's good, but he's not incredible, so I have no idea. Lonzo Ball is one of those players that it's going to be really, really weird to see what happens with him this summer. He could potentially swing the whole market. So I'm sure the Pelicans want to bring him back. I just don't know exactly what the cost will be on that, and if it's too much, they might back off. So they also have a bunch of team options here. They're going to pick up all of these. I mean, Zion Williamson, no duh. Jackson Hayes, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, all part of that draft class. There's no way they're declining any of those guys. So they'll all three be back for sure, unless there's obviously a trade involving Hayes or Alexander-Walker. But, Zion is very clearly here to stay. So maybe there's a trade for those other two guys. But in terms of the team option, they will definitely be picked up. And then also Wenyen Gabriel has a team option. He's all right. I mean, doesn't play a ton, gets in the game a little bit. On that cheap of a number, I think it's worth it to pick that up. So I will probably expect them to pick up that option on Wenyen Gabriel as well. Josh Hart heading into restricted free agency along with Lonzo Ball. He was obviously a part of that Anthony Davis trade for the Lakers. I really like Josh Hart. I think he's a really, really good role player. He can do a lot for this team, I think. He's a guy who brings in that energy. He can score, he can defend, he can pass, he can shoot. He can do all the above. He's really a really nice role player. I think a lot of contenders would love to get their hands on Josh Hart. And he could be a guy that gets a little bit more money this summer than you might be expecting. So if the Pelicans are willing to, pay for both Lonzo and Josh Hart, they could retain both of them. But I mean, the deal might get a little expensive for them on Hart, I think, especially if they're going to try hard to retain Lonzo. So Josh Hart is a guy who I could see, getting like $15-16 million per season. I really do think he's that effective of a role player off the bench, and I think there are teams around the league that will see that as well. So Josh Hart's a guy who, I'm sure the Pelicans would like to bring him back, but especially if they're paying a lot for Lonzo Ball, they might not be willing to break the bank for Josh Hart. So I could see him on a different team, and I think whoever ends up with him is getting a pretty good deal there, because Josh Hart is a guy who I personally have a soft spot for as role players in the league. I think he's really good. Couple other free agents down here. Willy Hernangomez was okay for them, actually. He played some spot backup center minutes. I thought he was, solid in his minutes there. I think they could, consider bringing him back, but it's obviously not that consequential if he ends up leaving. He was non-guaranteed this year, so we'll see this summer for Willy Hernangomez, but could go either way. Doesn't really matter. Didi Louzada, actually, I just looked that up. It's Gigi Louzada, I think is how you pronounce that. He's non-guaranteed for next season. He only played a couple of games for them this year. He's 22 years old. I think he'll be back unless they really need the roster spot for somebody else, but I would anticipate them giving him another chance to come in and see what he can do. And other than that, that's pretty much it. I mean, James Nunnally was on a two-way. He's fine, but I don't think it's worth it to bring him back at all. So I don't know. We'll see how they fill their two-way spots, but Nunnally doesn't really matter. So yeah, that's their free agents. And from what I can see, it looks like they'll have a little bit of cap space, but if you're re-signing Lonzo or Hart, either one or both, that gets eaten up pretty quickly. So unless there's a way to salary dump Bledsoe or Steven Adams, they're not going to be big players in free agency, in terms of signing people to big deals, just because they won't have the space for it. I believe they have a mid-level exception. They have a couple of avenues to add people, but other than a salary dump, they probably won't have much cap space at all. And speaking of a salary dump, I think they should absolutely consider that with Eric Bledsoe. He was not great for them this year. He's getting paid way too much. Next season he's on that guaranteed contract. The following year it's non-guaranteed. So if you can, pawn Eric Bledsoe off on a team like the Thunder or the Pistons that I talked about yesterday, maybe the Rockets, these teams that are clearly going to be tanking for a few more years here, I would probably consider doing that, just trying to get rid of him. Maybe, it takes a pick or one of your younger guys to do that. But that's okay. I would anticipate them to look at a couple of avenues in order to shop Eric Bledsoe around and try to get him off of this team. Maybe a contender wants him, but probably not at that number. Maybe there's a buyout possibility for him, given that second year is non-guaranteed. And so we'll see what happens with Bledsoe, but, I would anticipate them to try to get him off the team as much as possible. Steven Adams is another one. I liked the Adams trade for them at the time, but it didn't really work out. He didn't play super well this year. The good news is that his money comes way down, because the extension they signed him to was, only for about 17-18 million per season, whereas before he was getting paid 27. So his money comes down a little bit, but, he's fine. He's okay. But the spacing does really suffer with him on the floor. If you're playing him and Zion with each other, neither of them are three-point shooters, so it does kind of suffer a little bit. So we'll see. Steven Adams could potentially get moved again now that especially his contract has come down a little bit. There's a couple of contenders out there that might be in need of a center that would be willing to take a look. But yeah, Adams and Bledsoe, maybe you could salary dump either of those guys. Maybe you can get something back for them, but neither of them have a ton of value. And I don't anticipate they're in the long-term plans of this team either, so I could definitely see either of those two being moved. And then as far as needs in the offseason, it really depends on what happens with Bledsoe, Adams, and Lonzo, and Josh Hart. But if you don't bring back Lonzo and you trade Bledsoe away, point guard could be a need, but you have Kyra Lewis who's willing to step into that, but you need a backup anyway. At the 2 guard, you have Nickeil Alexander-Walker who can be ready to step into that role as well. Josh Hart can play that a little bit if you bring him back as well. You have Ingram at the small forward, Zion at the 4, and Steven Adams at the 5 unless he gets traded, and then Jackson Hayes can start for you. So, they have positions covered. They just need depth everywhere. So they've got these young guys, but you could use, depth if they're trying to be competitive next season. I imagine they'll try to make the playoffs, at least while they have Zion on the team, obviously. Even though he's still young, he's already really good, so might as well try to be as good as you can. So they just need depth at every position, really. Like, they have starters, they have potential starters across the board, but they could just use some more depth and some more experience, really, because like I said, a lot of those guys are young. I mean, like, if you have that starting lineup of, what did I say? Kyra Lewis, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Brandon Ingram, Zion, and Jackson Hayes, like, all those guys are, like, 23 and under. So you're going to need some experience on that team. So, just some veterans out there if you're going to try to be good again. And just find some guys who can plug the holes in and really go for that. And then in terms of the draft, I would just go best player available. They have I think it's 11th. Let me pull this up here. Yeah, they have, the best chance to get the 10th pick. It's about a 60% chance to get the 10th pick. They have like 20% to jump into the top 4, so they could potentially add another really talented prospect to this roster. You get up there, obviously. You get number 1, you got a shot at Cade Cunningham, potentially Evan Mobley at number 2, any of those guys in the top 5, Suggs, Green, Kuminga, whoever you like the best. I think this team is just going to be able to draft best player available, because like I said, they have like players at every position, but they just need depth. So just go for whoever you think is the best player and figure it out later. But yeah, man, this is definitely a pivotal offseason for New Orleans because, specifically the Lonzo Ball free agency, but also Josh Hart. We'll see what they do with those 2 guys. Restricted free agency is always a gamble. You never know what's going to happen. So we'll see how that goes for them. But they still have a bright future. Zion Williamson is arguably a top 10 player in the league already, top 15, top 10, however you want to rank him. He was really good this year, and as long as you have him on the team, they're going to have a bright future. Other than him, like I said, pretty much everybody's expendable, even Brandon Ingram. While I don't anticipate a trade for him this offseason, maybe in like 2 or 3 years, because I'm not sure about the fit with him and Zion long term, but he's only 23 years old, so maybe they just want to give it a little bit of time, and I would definitely not fault them for wanting to do that. So we'll see what they end up doing here, but with Lonzo and Josh Hart in restricted free agency, this should be a pretty interesting offseason to watch for the Pelicans. But yeah, that's all I have on New Orleans and their offseason. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Pelicans offseason. What are they going to do? How much is Lonzo going to get paid? Would love to hear your thoughts down below. But yeah, with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.